In the endless darkness of a war-torn galaxy, where the void itself seems to scream with the echoes of countless battles, Arctan Bellis was captured alive. A loyal servant of the Imperium, he had spent his life bound by duty, trained to obey without question, and conditioned to accept that loyalty meant sacrifice, pain, and death. As the battle raged around him, he expected chains, cold cells, and the unrelenting brutality of his captors. But what awaited him was something entirely different. The Tau, an alien empire often feared and misunderstood, did not greet him with violence or cruelty. Instead, they offered calm voices, gentle guidance, and an environment bathed in soft, unfamiliar light. Questions were posed that Arctan had never been allowed to ask, and a strange sense of patience replaced the terror he anticipated. In this stark contrast between the merciless Imperium and the thoughtful precision of the Tau, the seeds of doubt began to take root. Day by day, as Arctan's expectations of pain were replaced with quiet observation and learning, certainty began to fracture, and the rigid boundaries of his faith started to bend. He was being drawn into a process that was as subtle as it was powerful, a transformation that would challenge not only his beliefs but the very identity he had carried into countless battles. This is a story of fear confronted by compassion, of loyalty tested by truth, and of a man forced to reckon with what it truly means to choose one's path in a universe defined by endless war. The void of space stretched endlessly, dark and cold, punctuated only by the distant flare of distant star systems and the relentless pulse of warships exchanging fire. Arctan Bellis, a seasoned Imperial Navy officer, had fought countless engagements, yet nothing had prepared him for this moment. The Tau fleet had ambushed his vessel with precision and overwhelming force. Explosions rocked the corridors, alarms blared, and smoke filled every compartment. Men and machines alike fell under the alien barrage, and in the chaos, Arctan's world collapsed into darkness. He was captured. Bound and escorted to the Tau facility, his mind raced with memories of Imperial doctrine. Loyalty, obedience, sacrifice, these were not mere words, they were law. Captivity in the Imperium meant interrogation, torture, and often death. He braced himself for pain, for chains, for screams echoing in the void. Every fiber of his being expected cruelty. Yet when the doors of his holding cell opened, he was met with a silence so profound it felt almost unnatural. The walls were not cold stone or steel, they glowed with a soft, ambient light. There were no weapons brandished in menace, no executioners waiting to mark him for his failures. Instead, he was greeted by calm, measured voices. The Tau spoke with precision, their words deliberate but not threatening. Questions were posed that he had never been allowed to consider, about morality, duty, and the meaning of loyalty. His mind, trained to anticipate only the worst, recoiled at the gentleness. For the first time in his life, Arctan faced an enemy that did not seek his destruction. The expectation of suffering clashed violently with reality, and in that dissonance, the first cracks in his certainty began to form. Days passed, and with every routine task, every calm interaction, Arctan's anticipation of torment remained unmet. The very act of survival became strange and disorienting. He had been conditioned to fear captivity, but fear had no purchase here. Instead, he felt confusion, a sense of curiosity, and, most dangerously, doubt. Doubt about the Imperium he had served, doubt about the righteousness of his cause. In the shadow of expected pain, he began to understand something terrifying. The Tau had taken him alive, not to punish him, but to make him think. And thought, in a galaxy built on obedience, was the most dangerous weapon of all. In the quiet of the Tau rehabilitation facility, the world seemed almost unreal. Soft lights bathed every corridor, clean surfaces reflected a meticulous order, and the atmosphere exuded calm, a stark contrast to the blood-soaked battlefields Arctan had known. There were no bars, no chains, no screams. Here, the Tau operated with a philosophy that was alien, even incomprehensible to a man raised in the Imperium. They sought not to break him with violence, but to rebuild him with understanding. Arctan's first meetings with the Tau counselor, Vire, were disorienting. Vire's voice was calm, measured, almost soothing, yet every question carried weight. Why do you obey without question? What is loyalty if it leads to suffering? The questions pried at beliefs he had never challenged, excavating buried doubts and suppressed curiosity. At first, he resisted fiercely, clinging to his sense of duty and the rigid structure of Imperial teaching. He argued, he refused to cooperate, he remained defensive. But the Tao did not retaliate. There was no punishment, no intimidation. Instead, there was patience, and a relentless, almost clinical insistence on thought and reflection. Education became a tool of transformation. Arctan was introduced to the history and philosophy of the Tao, their dedication to the greater good, their cooperative society, their emphasis on knowledge and technology. He saw how their society integrated individuals rather than breaking them, how prisoners like him were treated not as enemies, but as potential contributors. Alongside educational exercises, he was given tasks, technical work that required focus and skill, projects that demanded creativity and responsibility. Each success, each completed task, slowly eroded his resistance. The method was subtle, almost invisible. Every small interaction, every calm response to his anger or frustration, undermined the assumptions he had carried his whole life. He began to see the Imperium's brutality not as necessity, but as a choice, a method of control rather than justice. Meanwhile, the Tao's inclusion of other integrated prisoners, such as Kessa, offered living proof that change was possible. These encounters were not designed to humiliate or convert, they were designed to reveal. Arctan saw what a society built on cooperation could look like, and the contrast with the rigid, oppressive Imperium became undeniable. By the end of these weeks, Arctan's mind had begun to shift imperceptibly. The Tao method was not about obedience, it was about reflection. They did not tell him who to be, they forced him to confront who he was and who he could become. The process was not painless. Confusion, anger, and guilt rose in waves, but the gentle, relentless logic of the Tao proved more potent than chains or torture ever could. And in that quiet, Arctan realized that the real struggle was no longer against the Tao, it was within himself. As Arctan spent more time in the Tao facility, the foundations of his faith began to tremble. Every lesson, every conversation, chipped away at the certainty that had once defined him. He had been taught that obedience was sacred, that the Imperium's will was absolute, and that questioning authority was a sin punishable by death. Yet here, in the gentle cadence of the Tao's philosophy, questioning became a tool rather than a crime. Each new insight, each observation of cooperation and fairness, forced him to confront truths he had long avoided. The Imperium, he began to see, was not the paragon of order he had believed. Its victories came at enormous human cost, its loyalty demanded unquestioning submission, and its so-called justice was often little more than cruelty disguised as duty. The stories of massacres, of enslaved worlds, of innocents crushed under bureaucracy and zeal, had been whispered in hidden corners, dismissed as exaggeration. Now, confronted with knowledge and reflection, Arctan could no longer deny them. The Tao's society, by contrast, appeared advanced, inclusive, and efficient. It was not perfect, but it valued life, choice, and collaboration. Interactions with other prisoners amplified this realization. Kessa, a former soldier integrated into the Tao system, exemplified what survival and adaptation could achieve. She was not broken, she was empowered. Watching her work, speak, and think freely, Arctan understood that survival in this new world required more than obedience, it required transformation. Resistance, he realized, was increasingly futile, not because of force, but because his old worldview was crumbling. Even as his understanding grew, Arctan wrestled with guilt. How could he reconcile the actions of his past with the new truths he was learning? Loyalty to the Imperium had been drilled into him since youth. The very notion of betrayal tormented him. Every choice, every moment of reflection, felt like a knife twisting in his conscience. Yet, with every day, he also felt a strange liberation. Knowledge, once forbidden and feared, became the first step toward clarity. In the quiet of the facility, amidst work, study, and conversation, Arctan began to glimpse an alternative existence, one where duty was not blind and where morality was not dictated by fear. The cracks in his faith widened, but they were not destructive. They were openings, passages through which thought, choice, and self-realization could enter. And within that fragile but growing space, Arctan confronted the profoundest question of all: if survival no longer demanded obedience, then who would he choose to be? The days blurred into weeks, and Arctan Bellis found himself changed in ways he could scarcely articulate. At first, his actions were mechanical, compliance born of habit rather than conviction. Yet slowly, participation became engagement. Technical tasks, once approached with mere efficiency, now offered satisfaction and a sense of contribution. The quiet logic of his work, the measured responses of his peers, and the patient guidance of Vire coalesced into an unexpected revelation: he could think freely, act intentionally, and exist without fear of arbitrary punishment. Transformation was neither sudden nor easy. Arctan experienced waves of guilt, questioning his past loyalties and the orders he had once followed unquestioningly. He wrestled with grief for comrades lost in the endless wars of the Imperium, for worlds ravaged by blind zeal, and for the certainty that had defined his life and identity. Every step toward adaptation felt like a betrayal of everything he had been taught, yet every step also carried the promise of something profoundly human: choice. Engagement with the Tau Society offered daily lessons, not only about technology and strategy but also about empathy and cooperation. Integrated prisoners, once enemies, became collaborators. Shared tasks, discussions about philosophy, and even quiet moments of reflection highlighted the contrast between the oppressive rigidity of the Imperium and the adaptive, inclusive nature of Tau governance. Through these interactions, Arctan began to recognize his capacity for growth, resilience, and moral reasoning, a capacity stifled for decades by dogma and fear. The psychological toll was immense. The transformation required confronting personal failings, accepting guilt, and embracing uncertainty. But in that struggle, Arctan discovered the rarest gift in the 41st millennium: autonomy. The ability to make choices, to define purpose, to find meaning in a universe that often offered none. He learned that survival was not merely about living, it was about becoming. And in that becoming, he found humanity, clarity, and the profound liberation of self-determination. By the end of his journey, Arctan Bellis had been forged anew, not through chains or torture, but through reflection, learning, and the courage to question. He had crossed a threshold few had ever imagined possible, from unquestioning soldier to thoughtful being, capable of choosing his own path. In a galaxy dominated by war, cruelty, and unyielding hierarchies, Arctan had found the extraordinary, the chance to become more than a pawn, to become a man who could decide his own destiny. In the endless expanse of the 41st millennium, where war has consumed billions and the stars themselves seem to bleed with conflict, Arctan Bellis's journey stands as a quiet testament to the power of choice. He came into Tau custody expecting chains, torment, and the unyielding cruelty of an enemy empire, yet he found none of that. Instead, he encountered patience, reflection, and a philosophy that valued thought over obedience. Through gentle guidance, education, and exposure to a society built on cooperation rather than domination, the rigid structures of his loyalty began to crumble. The man who once defined himself solely by service to the Imperium was forced to confront uncomfortable truths about the universe he had fought to protect and the society he had unquestioningly served. Transformation is rarely without cost. Arctan wrestled with guilt, shame, and the haunting specters of past actions. Memories of lost comrades and ravaged worlds pressed upon him, and the weight of betrayal, both real and perceived, threatened to consume his newfound clarity. Yet within this struggle, he discovered the most extraordinary truth of all: the freedom to choose. The freedom to question, to reflect, and to define who he would become. Survival in the 41st millennium is often measured in mere days or victories, but Arctan's survival was measured in the reclamation of self, in the courage to think and feel independently. By the end of his journey, he had crossed a threshold few could imagine. From loyal soldier to reflective thinker, from captive to participant, Arctan Bellis embraced a rare and precious gift in a galaxy dominated by violence and fear: the chance to become more than a pawn. His story reminds us that even in the darkest voids, even amidst the endless machinery of war, humanity can endure. And sometimes, the gentlest light, the patient voice, the invitation to question, the permission to choose, can illuminate a path far more profound than any sword or cannon ever could. In the end, Arcton's scars were not marks of defeat, they were proof of survival, of transformation, and of the enduring power of choice.